The cell phone industry is one of the world's most dynamic and fast-changing industries. On one hand, players can rise to glory in a rapid manner, just like Huawei and Xiaomi. Conversely, they can also fall rapidly to the point of exiting the industry entirely, or their best become an also ran. Now that 2018 is almost over, I thought it would be appropriate to keep tabs on how the numerous OEMs have fared in general. We saw the continuous onslaught of Chinese OEMs, while at the same time, the pioneers of Android have largely continued their fade into irrelevance. So let's begin by talking about the number one smartphone OEM, which is none other than Samsung, of course. Given that 2018 was a top year for Samsung, it shouldn't be of any surprise that the Galaxy S9 series and Note 9 didn't sell as well as expected by some, especially since they merely improved upon the solid foundations of their predecessors. While their flagship lineup was pretty alright against the competition, Samsung in my frank opinion didn't do that well in the low-end to mid-range market segment, where most of the sales figures are for most OEMs unless they are Apple. None of the A and J series phones they released this year, in my frank opinion, could be compared well to the very aggressive Chinese OEMs. There were quite a few stinkers, for instance the Galaxy J4 Plus and J6 Plus, which were way too expensive to justify having mere Snapdragon 425s in their package. Even the 2018 Galaxy A7 and A9, which boasted the first triple and quad cam setups in their price ranges, were panned for lackluster cameras. Altogether, this contributed to lackluster sales and a fall in market share. According to Gartner, between the third quarter of last year to this year, Samsung's market share nosedived from 22.3% to 18.9%. All this while Huawei and Xiaomi enjoy a surge in growth that we will explain later. But thankfully for Samsung fans, we could be seeing light at the end of the tunnel by 2019. At their developer conference in November, Samsung gave a sneak peek at their foldable phone concept, which if they execute correctly, could be as game-changing as the original iPhone was. And for the mid-rangers, Samsung is apparently preparing an intense revamp with a new 2-digit numeric scheme and replacing J, C, and on, and very aggressive pricing to match. For example, the rumored Galaxy M20, which is going to come at US $210, will have a Full HD Plus screen with Infinity U notch and an Exynos 7885 SoC. This was what Samsung should have done from the beginning, given that it enjoys vertical integration on many of the smartphone components since it makes most of them in-house like the displays, cameras, and SoCs. But better late than never, I suppose. It never ceases to amaze me how fast Huawei has risen from a no-brand for networking and cheap cell phones to a serious threat to what was previously seen as an entrenched Apple-Samsung duopoly. Yet at the same time, their smartphone division faces a major threat that could potentially undermine its very existence. Referring back to the same Gartner source that I used, the report noted that Huawei enjoyed a massive 43% sales increase between 2017 to 2018, edging out Apple as number 2 in the process. In fact, Huawei was so bullish that they publicly set their targets towards beating Samsung by 2020. All this despite a boycott movement in the US where Huawei initially came close to a deal with AT&T and Verizon at CES 2018 to stock its phones before the US government intervened, citing security concerns. But the truth is that the US consists of only 4% of the world's population, even though it might be punching above its own weight in terms of importance to the industry, as clearly seen by the near-death experience of ZTE. So the US is not clearly a do-or-die market for Huawei, as previous market leader Nokia can prove. So why did Huawei grow so fast in spite of being seen as a security threat by some Western eyes? First, it was aggressive marketing. Secondly, we saw Huawei matching and even beating competitors at their own game. Huawei was the first to push for 3 cameras on their P20 Pro and nearly beat Samsung to the punch for the first phone on the market with an Infinity O display with the Nova 4. Meanwhile, their Honor sub-brand is truly beginning to put pressure on Xiaomi's position as a value-for-money brand to go to. The Honor 8X is shaping to be a formidable competitor to the Redmi Note series, whilst the Honor Play competes against the Pocophone F1 with a premium metal unibody and NFC. But now, let's turn to the existential threat towards Huawei that I mentioned earlier. Initially, we started the year with the setback at CES 2018, then Australia banned Huawei from bidding for 5G network contracts. Next, it was New Zealand, despite the objection of carriers, and now Britain and Japan. The US itself is even considering going to the extent of compensating its allies for boycotting Huawei, and that's not even mentioning the recent arrest and trial of their own CFO. While it doesn't affect their smartphone division directly, it has to be noted that the smartphone division has been piggybacking on the success of Huawei's network division in selling the carriers, where the carriers agreed to stock Huawei phones alongside buying the networking equipment. If the continued boycott against Huawei intensifies, it may limit Huawei's scope of growth to just its domestic market and perhaps a bunch of less developed economies that are less hostile towards China. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves and start accusing Huawei of spying on behalf of the Chinese government, okay? That is another topic for another time and place. Frankly, 2018 was a so-so year for Apple. It's also a top year for them after the major revamp that was the iPhone X, but not as bad as compared to Samsung flagships, given that pent-up demand for the bigger iPhone X and the more affordable iPhone X have been fulfilled by the iPhone XS Max and XR respectively. They didn't blow us all away, but these are still okay buys for iOS users. Okay, however, might not be entirely okay in this context. A key cause for concern for Apple is how they have positioned themselves as a quasi-luxury brand, especially after Tim Cook became Apple CEO. Apple will not be able to grow much in this way. The recent Gartner report indicated that Apple has fallen to number 3 while gaining merely 0.7% growth, aka what investors would likely term as flat sales. In fact, there are some troubling signs that Apple's current iPhone strategy is not working as well as it used to. First, Apple, using the explanation that unit sales are irrelevant to the strength of its business, ceased providing unit sales data from this December onwards. Secondly, the Wall Street Journal cited insider sources that claimed that iPhone production would be slashed by as much as a third of what was originally planned. Yes, these reports have been heard of time and time again, but to add fuel to the fire, in Japan, where Apple essentially turned the cell phone market upside down, flagship carrier NTT Docomo has apparently been greenlighted by Apple to discount the iPhone XR to the tune of US $100. And furthermore, it was also reported that Apple has assigned a significant portion of its marketing staff into pushing the sales of the iPhones. Seemingly, one of their strategies has to be copy Samsung's playbook and highlight more aggressively the trade-in offers for the new iPhones on their website, as well as increasing the trade-in values themselves. Personally, I see a lot of coincidences to this approach to those adopted by Jean-Louis Gassi, who would become infamous at Apple in the late 1980s for his 55 or die philosophy, where he advocated that Apple should only do the high-end computers with fat profit margins. He was so insistent on this approach that at least 2 low-cost Macintosh projects were rejected as a result. Not too surprisingly, the sales fell, and then CEO John Scully capitulated to popular demand, and thus the Macintosh Classic and LC were born. Eventually, unless Apple continues its streak of revolutionary gadgets that can disrupt entire industries, I would expect shareholders to increasingly go frustrated with Apple's management team and pressurize Tim Cook to quit. This doesn't mean that Apple is doomed to fail and become bankrupt. More likely than not, Apple is falling into the Steve Ballmer trap that Microsoft experienced back when Ballmer was CEO. In other words, the company just gets by well without introducing technological disruptions and simultaneously getting outgunned by nimbler competitors on emerging technologies. I can't really advise how Apple could avoid that Microsoft trap that I mentioned earlier, but perhaps as a stopgap measure, Apple could say bring out an iPhone LC. Apple has a major trump card that is impossible to replicate, iOS. If they could say replace the iPhone 7 and 8 series with a brand new model specifically targeting the US $400 and below price point, with specs similar to say the regular iPad, plus some sought after features such as a high-res selfie camera and God forbid, expandable memory, they will have a hit in their hands, since Apple can now avoid the stigma of selling hand-me-downs by promoting it as brand new. What stood out for me for this year for Xiaomi was not only their hype IPO, but also their diversification from their online roots to embrace the offline market. They began to open many offline retail stores globally and expanded to include much of Western Europe in the process. All this while maintaining aggressive pricing, contrary to what you might expect of shifting away from solely online channels. The secret to Xiaomi's successful business strategy lies in the fact that they do not only sell smartphones, they also sell an entire ecosystem of appliances by partnering with startups to make value for money appliances that you might buy even if you don't use a Xiaomi phone, such as say earphones, smart weighing scales, and even vacuum cleaners and toothbrushes. They are willing to sacrifice profit margins in favor of greater sales volumes, which can work very well for them since many of these things are really commoditized without much room for revolutionary improvements. At the same time, Xiaomi wants to leverage MIUI as a revenue machine. This has perhaps gone too far for some. Instead of just say the team stores, entertainment services, and so on, there are now reports of advertisements scattered throughout the default apps, especially within India itself. In short, through maximizing sales volume while building a holistic ecosystem, Xiaomi has rocketed in terms of market share and profits. It commands 9.7% of market share, making it number 4 in the smartphone industry, while profits for the third quarter of this year were now US 360 million worth in total, and revenue grew by almost 50%, a very solid result by a company that was on shaky ground just 2 years ago. For American fans out there, I foresee Xiaomi smartphones making its way to the US by next year, as what its CEO promised. Xiaomi already has an online US store selling accessories like earphones and power banks, and has already begun selling IoT devices through Amazon. It lacks a stigmatizing connection to the Chinese government unlike Huawei, and is also backed by American company Qualcomm financially. This is good reason to be optimistic about Xiaomi entering the US market and perhaps turning the stagnant low and mid-end market there by storm. And special mention has to be made of the Pocophone F1. It truly is a OnePlus killer, stripping away most of the frills like premium design and waterproofing while focusing on the core essentials like battery life, expandable storage, and so on. I will happily bet that at least 75% of the world's population will be more than contented to settle with the Pocophone as their daily driver. In case you did a double take on the name, let me explain. BBK Electronics is the parent company of 4 smartphone brands you might already be familiar with: Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, and Realme. In fact, if these 4 smartphone subsidiaries were counted under one roof, they will be number 2 in the charts. Oppo and Vivo continued their habits of flooding their prime turf with the usual barrage of iPhone lookalike mid-ranges that are perhaps even more confusing than Samsung's own. Yet at the same time, we have to give them credit for making amends to actually bringing us to a truly bezel-less future. First, Oppo and Vivo experimented with motorized camera pop-ups with the Find X and Nex respectively. At the same time, the notches on their mid-ranges have shrunken from wide rectangular ones to streamlined teardrop ones, so thumbs up for how quickly Oppo and Vivo have moved on. We also saw the rise of Realme as a true blue Redmi competitor as well, if the rhyming name wasn't big enough of a hint. First launching in India, now Realme has expanded to include Pakistan, Indonesia, the Philippines, and in no time, they will have the same reach as Xiaomi. Meanwhile, OnePlus have sort of shifted their position in the smartphone market. They have gone up somewhat in the pricing scale, but at the same time, they are introducing a degree of luxury features like an in-display fingerprint scanner, while making speedy performance a trademark. My best analogy for this would be how Hyundai's Genesis Motors is positioning itself in the luxury car market as a value-for-money alternative to the European incumbents. They also achieved a critical milestone into becoming mainstream. T-Mobile US agreed to stock the OnePlus 60 for sale, and even Verizon approved the 60 for use on their network, even if they are not selling the phone in the first place. If prices for flagship phones continue to hover around the US $1,000 mark, OnePlus will have even more reason to celebrate. The former number 1 in the cell phone industry, now free of the albatross that was Windows Phone, has made impressive gains in market share this year. Last I checked, HMD has soared to become the number 10 in the smartphone industry and number 2 in the feature phone industry. It has done well in regions where its previous incarnation was strong at: Vietnam, Western Europe for instance. The key to HMD's global success does not solely lie on the strength of the Nokia brand alone. It has to do with how they built up the foundations, starting from the existing dumb phone business, which even after the smartphone division was completely gutted in the aftermath of Windows Phone, was still quite healthy, especially after most major brands stopped caring about them. Then they started making very solid low-end and mid-ranges that are desirable, in nature, leveraging on Android One as a key selling point before other manufacturers join in the fun. And who could forget the marketing coup that was the Retro 3310 and 8110 4G? The journey towards rebuilding the Nokia empire, however, is far from accomplished. According to a German interview, there are two milestones ahead to fulfill. Firstly, the missing flagship smartphone that is as cutting edge as were the Nokia N series back in the day. Rumors suggest that it will come in the form of the penta-camera Nokia 9 PureView, but the interview mentioned that it has yet to clear Nokia's quality benchmarks. Then again, creating and selling a true smartphone flagship is no easy task. You should just ask Essential and HTC. So this is perhaps a good sign that Nokia will likely hit the bullseye once it is ready sometime in 2019. The next milestone is in regards to demographics. Most Nokia buyers are above 35 years of age and probably are old enough to remember when Nokia was still at its peak. HMD seems to be quite keen to avoid being seen as your father's Nokia and appeal to a more younger demographic that might have only remembered Nokia as the cautionary tale in business. Personally, I saw the Nokia 5.1 Plus and its key selling point of gaming and at an affordable price as the first step of this approach. They should continue to stay keen on what this demographic might look out for and follow in the footsteps of the Nokia 3000 series that was explicitly aiming at such a demographic, with features such as express on covers. You would think that being the creator of Android, plus collaborating with the major OEMs to create the Nexus series, will prove to be a winning strategy for Google's new Pixel smartphones. Yet the Pixel series have yet to achieve the same level of ubiquity and consumer awareness as Samsung, Apple, or even Huawei, with at best 2% market share in certain territories. So why is this happening despite the tons of money Google poured into making and marketing the Pixel, to the point of sponsoring primetime TV? There are several reasons to explain this. The first one is limited availability in markets. Samsung, Apple, and Huawei managed to be ubiquitous simply because they sweated blood and tears into building strong relationships with carriers and distributors across the globe, localizing the phones if necessary, just like how the iPhone gained emoji, Suica support, and water resistance thanks to the unique demands of Japan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that during the Nexus days, it was the responsibility of OEMs rather than Google in making sure the product itself were distributed across the globe. So when the first Pixel was released, it was only sold in a few select markets, since Google perhaps lacked the distribution networks it would need to sell it worldwide. And yet in 2018, things haven't improved drastically. Google only sells the Pixel 3 series in 13 countries, less than 7% of all the world's territories. And even within these territories, they lack the same wide reach of the incumbents, especially on the carrier side of things. For instance, in the US, only Verizon carries the Pixel 3. Japan, of the three carriers, NTT, Docomo, and SoftBank have the Pixel 3, but not AU. And in Singapore, it's a similar story, with StarHub and Singtel having it, but not M1. In contrast, Apple, Samsung, and Huawei sell their flagships in most of the available SKUs to all the carriers in the world, increasing their brand awareness and ubiquity in the process. Secondly, when compared to its rivals, the Google Pixel falls short in many areas, especially in terms of hardware. The salesperson at the average store can easily sell the average consumer on better hardware like multiple cameras, heaploads of RAM, 4000 mAh plus batteries, and so forth. Google's reliance on software to compensate for the lack of hardware chops is admirable, especially in the camera department. But it's much harder to sell to the average consumer on software-based chops. Just imagine the difficulty needed for the salesman to tell your average consumer on the benefits of stock up-to-date Android, when he or she can just simply point to the Galaxy S9 Plus and the 10S for their dual cameras. I think that stock up-to-date Android is a relatively niche feature among the mainstream. Anecdotally, I have never heard of customers buying a smartphone because it has the latest Android. See how Vivo and Oppo have survived despite not being at the forefront of Android updates. And for those who truly care, they can either go to iOS for a long cycle of updates or get an Android One device from Nokia, Xiaomi, Motorola, and so on at a cheaper price than what the Pixel sells for, just like the Nexus series. But ultimately, it is Google itself that will determine the degree of success of Pixel. As Wired.com argues, if the Pixel manages to follow in the footsteps of Microsoft Surface lineup in giving OEMs a reference guide as how to do Android justice, as well as a backup plan in case Samsung and Huawei decide to deviate from Google's vision of Android, it will have already succeeded in Google's eyes. And to wrap this all up, there were rumors that Google will bring in Pixel 3 Lite soon. I highly doubt they will succeed given that even mid-rangers need hardware features to sell very well. And they lack features that people expect of mid-rangers such as dual SIM support and micro SD support. Lastly, we have a lot of Android One phones like the Nokia 8.1 that are likely to give the Pixel 3 Lites a good run for their money. LG Electronics as a whole did very well, but the smartphone division proved to be more of a drag than a help in its earnings as a whole. The most recent Q2 financial results showed that LG Mobile made a loss of US $171.95 million, worse than the US $170 million loss it incurred in 2017 Q2. It didn't help that LG has virtually no decent mid and low-end phones to speak of, maybe except in the US where Chinese OEMs have yet to start changing the game there. And LG's flagship G series and B series have been critically assessed by reviewers to be inferior to Samsung, Apple and Huawei, which is not helped by the fact that LG arguably ditched what made its smartphone so unique as recently as 2 years ago: unapologetically rugged looks, removable batteries, and an odd quirk or two like the LG V20 that currently records this video. But at least LG might have some intentions about turning things around. They transferred over their former president of their highly successful entertainment division to their mobile division to reset their smartphone strategy. My advice for the new head is to make competitive mid-rangers that share some of LG's flagship selling points, say quad DeX, wide-angle cameras, all while making sure that the core specs are up to snuff. At the same time, double down on the marketing prowess of K-culture, like what you did when you hired BTS to promote the LG G7, but on a bigger scale. Once a contender for top 5 smartphone manufacturer as recently as 2013, Sony Mobile was caught flat-footed by some unfortunate events since the peak of the Xperia Z3. First, it was the Snapdragon 810 controversy, then the controversial X series reboot, and again this year the XZ2 reboot, all while being generally slow to keep track with major trends like wider aspect ratios, OIS, and so on. The Xperia XZ2 had two major faults that were roundly criticized by fans. First, it was the removal of the headphone jack, which hurt even more given how Sony was built on the heritage of audiovisual prowess. Second was the overall design of the flagships themselves. The ambient flow of flagship design moved the fingerprint sensor in a position that was making it easy to confuse with the camera sensor and end up smudging the camera lens in the process for users. And in the case of the Xperia XZ2 Premium, it led to a phone that was an ergonomic disaster to hold. When your phones don't exactly have cutting-edge hardware chops, and you also end up angering fans with your hardware tweaks, it is definitely a recipe for disaster. Sony's solutions, whenever its mobile division faces headwinds, is to keep cutting staff and costs. This has never worked at all in the smartphone industry, sadly. BlackBerry, OG Palm, and HTC merely delayed the inevitable through this strategy. If Sony still wants to win in the smartphone wars, they need to double down resources on their own smartphone division to invest on the cutting edge hardware they need to succeed, just like in the days of the Xperia Z1. News of the upcoming Xperia XZ4, however, might bring about a bit of cheer. It is said to be bringing about a 21:9 aspect ratio screen for the first time since the LG Chocolate of 2009. 3 cameras on the back, and resurrecting the fan-favorite side-mounted fingerprint sensor and headphone jack even still. Let's just hope that Sony will be able to make a good comeback, or at the very least in terms of theoretical specs when compared to its rivals. HTC's story in smartphones continues another year of tragic decline. The company seemed to be mostly content with focusing on PR efforts while releasing only a small portfolio of devices, including the flop that was the U12 Plus, an okay flagship that courted controversy over its volume and power keys. In such a cutthroat market, even the smallest flaws can often turn to be deal breakers. HTC, interestingly enough, also repurposed the hardware as the Exodus One, targeting the cryptocurrency investors, which however now looks like a backfiring strategy now given that cryptocurrency is crashing at the moment. And it clearly shows in its financial results. The third quarter of this year saw net losses worth US $84.7 million, with market share close to zero in most of the entire world. And earlier in the year, HTC already laid off nearly a quarter of its staff. To add to its problems, HTC does not have the help of other divisions like LG and Sony that can help in vertical integration or perhaps offer a financial shoulder to keep it afloat at the very least. In my frank opinion, HTC should have showed the company wholesale instead of a part of it when they made the deal with Google last year. It would have been a much more honourable end for a company that for a brief moment contributed to the smartphone industries in a very significant way with the world's first Android phone, the HTC Dream, and arguably the most timeless industrial design ever in Android, the HTC One M7. Finally, let's talk about two honourable mentions that I have regarding smartphone OEMs, Palm and BlackBerry. Out of the blue, a team of San Francisco-based designers came up with the idea of a new type of smartphone accessory, a pseudo phone only 3.3 inches small to accompany your 6-inch or above phablet. And so, the Palm phone was born, alas, in no way related to the original Palm, unlike say HMD's link to Nokia. The Palm name given to the phone, however, was just a lucky coincidence, for that new Palm's primary backer, TCL, had bought the rights to the name long ago but left it dormant for quite some time. I have a lot more to say about this new company, and for the interest of time, I'll link a link to the following video above where I'll discuss my thoughts on them even further. Now under license from TCL, BlackBerry is the sole OEM manufacturing the candy bar, QWERTY-style smartphones that became near obsolete once touchscreen slates became mainstream. It's wonderful that people can still have the choice of a physical keyboard on phones, even if it's just a small niche of fans keeping it afloat. Matters are also helped by the release of the Key 2 LE, which I would personally consider a light experience done right, by removing only the things that aren't truly needed for a great physical QWERTY experience, like downgraded cameras and SoC. And so that concludes my end of the year-end analysis of the state of smartphones and their various OEMs in 2018. Feel free to comment and start a debate, or even give alternative points of view if you must. If you do enjoy such commentary, be sure to like, comment and subscribe to my videos. It means a lot to me personally as just a beginner YouTuber, and I'll see you soon in the next video.